In this lesson, we're going to talk about how to factor trinomials when the leading coefficient is greater than 1. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to factor trinomials in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. When we're factoring trinomials, remember that any trinomial that cannot be written as the product of two other polynomials is considered prime. And the greatest common factor between all the terms would be 1. When the coefficient is greater than 1, when that leading coefficient is greater than 1, then a method that we could use to solve it would be to use guess and check. In the guess and check method, what we do first is we factor the first term. So if I factor 2x squared, that could be factored into 2x and x. I factor the last term. Negative 2 could be factored into negative 2 times 1 or 2 times negative 1. And then we pick a combination as far as our binomials are concerned, and then we would FOIL the check. Again, when we guess and check, you may get lucky the first time and only have to guess once, but oftentimes you're going to have to guess and check multiple times before you find the correct solution. If the trinomial has a common factor between A, B, and C, you want to factor out that greatest common factor first, because in a lot of cases it'll make it easier for you to factor the trinomial. And remember that when we're factoring, we want everything to be in simplest form, so the GCF amongst any terms in either binomials needs to be 1. Okay, so we're going to factor the following trinomial. And if it cannot be factored, then we're going to write prime. Now remember on this one, we're going to guess and check. So in the guess and check method, we factor the first term. So I factor 3y squared. So I know 3y and y could be my factors of 3y squared. And so keep in mind when we're factoring the first term, we want the variable to be in both of the factors. So 3y and y, perfect. We factor the second term, the last term. I know that 8 can be factored into 1 and 8. 2 and 4, and that's it. So I know that these are going to be my factors here. The other thing to keep in mind is this middle term here. If it's positive, the factors need to be positive. If it's negative, the factors need to be negative. So then I'm going to guess and check. So in the guess and check, I set up my two binomials. The first term that got factored, the 3y squared, those factors are going to be the first terms in each of my binomials. And then I have some options. Okay, I could put 1 and 8 as the second terms. I could put 2 and 4 as the second terms. When we're guessing and checking, it's going to be important that you keep track of the combinations that you've tried. So if I try 1 and 8, I might put 1 in this one. I might put 8 in this one. Again, we really don't know which one should go where at this point. We're going to guess, and then we're going to FOIL and check to make sure that it's the correct solution. And if it's not, then we go back to the drawing board. So I have 3y times y. That's 3y squared. 3y times 8, that's positive 24y. Plus 1y plus 8. Now I know that this one's not going to work because 24 and 1y do not give me 10y. So I'm going to write this combination off to the side so that I don't do that combination again. And then I'm going to go back to the drawing board. Alright, so my first terms in both are not really going to change because my only combinations I have are 3y and y. We put 1 and 8. Remember in this one, that was pretty far off. So if I know that it was super far off, I might not try 1 and 8 again. I might save that combination for later. But I might try 2 and 4. So if I put in 2 in this one and I put 4 in this one, I might try it, see how close I get to getting that middle term to be 10. Again, we've guessed. Again, I don't know if 2 and 4 should go in the exact order. So I'm guessing. We're going to check. 3 times y is 3y squared. 3 times 4 is 12y. plus 2y plus 8. So I know this combination is not correct, but I did get closer because 14y is pretty close to 10y. So what I might try on this one is just switching that combination around. Again, I do want to write it off to the sides, that way I don't do it again. But as I'm checking this one again, I'm going to try it again. So again, 3y and y make up my first terms. And instead of 2 going in the first binomial, let me put 4 in the first, and let me put 2 in the second, and let's try it that way. So 3y times y, that's 3y squared. 3y times 2, that's 6y. 4 times y is 4y. And 4 times 2 is 8. And these middle terms will combine to give me 10y. So this one was factorable, and my factors happen to be 3y plus 4 and y plus 2. Now on this one, remember I had to guess 3 times before I found the correct solution. Sometimes you get lucky and you only have to guess once, and sometimes you're not as lucky and you have to guess multiple times. Let's take a look at another example. So again, when we're factoring, we want to factor the first term. So 3c squared, 3c and c. Remember, both of the factors we want to have contain the c. And since 3 is prime, it would just be 3 and 1. And then we look here, we look at negative 5. So we have really negative 1 and 5, or 5 and negative 1. So those are my options that we have. Okay, so we're going to guess and check. 3c and c will go in the middle, and then I'm going to pick combinations that I think might work. So I might do negative 1 and 5, and as I'm kind of thinking through, I might put negative 1 in this one, because when I do 3 times, if I put negative 5 here, or if I put positive 5 where I have the negative 1, so put positive 5 here, when I multiply it to 3, that's going to give me 15. So I do want to have a little bit of strategy as to where I put them, so they don't have to guess as much. So I put 5 in the first binomial, so I don't have to multiply it to 3. And then I check it. So I'm still, again, I'm guessing, but I'm guessing with a little bit of strategy. So 3c times c gives me 3c squared. 3c times 1 gives me negative 3c. 5 times c is 5c. And 5 times negative 1 is negative 5. So I know that I'm really close on this one because I have positive 2, and so I need a negative 2. So I'm going to write that combination down off to the side because, again, that wasn't the right combination, but I know that I'm really close. So I clear this part, and we've got 3c, we've got c. So I know that the number was correct, I just needed the opposite sign. So instead of making this a positive 5, let's write it as, and I just realized that I have this. It says the same thing, so let me change that. This should be 1 and negative 5. So instead of having positive 5 here, let's make that a negative 5, and let's make that a positive 1, and let's guess again. So 3c times c, that's 3c squared. 3c times 1, that's positive 3c, minus 5c, minus 5. And so I know that when I combine these two in the middle, I get negative 2c. So I have 3c squared minus 2c minus 5. And so my factors for this one are 3c minus 5 and c plus 1. Now on this one, I didn't have to guess as much, again, because I'm using a little bit more strategy as I'm trying to determine what to put there. It is important to remember that before you label a polynomial prime, that you must go through all of your combinations, all of your options. So if I have 2 factors here, okay, I've got 4 combinations, because I could put negative 1 in the first, or I could put negative 1 in the second. And then same thing here, I could put positive 1 in the first or positive 1 in the second. And so if there are 4 numbers, 4 combinations. If there's 6 numbers, 6 combinations. So you need to go through all of the combinations before you say that a polynomial is prime. Okay, we do have application problems that we want to make sure that we go through before we start solving them. So, in this particular one, we have 3x cubed plus 24x squared plus 45x. Now, on this particular one, before we factor it, because it's saying what are the dimensions, so we want to know what the length, the width, and the height are. Before we factor it, or before we factor using guess and check, it's important to remember that if there's a greatest common factor amongst the terms, pull out that greatest common factor. So we know, okay, that between 3, 24, and 45, that 3 is a common factor amongst all of those. And between x squared, and x cubed, x is a common factor. So if I pull out 3x, I'm left with x squared for the first term. I'm left with 8x for the second term, and I'm left with 15 for that third term. And what you notice on the inside is that this is a regular trinomial where the coefficient's 1, and we can use the diamond method or the box method where we're looking for product sum. So product of 15, sum of 8. I notice that those two numbers are 5 and 3. And so my factors for this one would be x plus 5 and x plus 3. So it's important, okay, to make sure that you factor out a GCF so that you can avoid doing extra work in the long run. So my length, my width, and my height would be my 3 factors, which are 3x, x plus 5, and x plus 3. This is how we factor polynomials when the coefficient is greater than 1.